A crying child. This morning I stepped outside my townhome onto the concrete patio to enjoy the rising sun and its welcoming warmth, accompanied by the cool breeze of a midsummer morning. I could hear the birds already busy with their morning rituals, the sprinklers watering the grass below my flat, and the leaves rustling as the breeze breathed through them. In the distance, beyond the nearby store's loading dock, came the familiar hustle and bustle of trucks unloading their goods. I closed my eyes, stretched, and embraced the sunshine upon my face. I attempt to quiet the static noise of ordinary life unfolding in the background. Then I heard it. A child cried out with a scream so agonizing, so desperate, that it immediately shattered the peace of the morning. Across from my flat is a small daycare. It was the hour when parents were dropping off their children. This was not the first time I had heard such cries. Whether it was the same child, I could not tell, but this scream caught my attention because it sounded less like simple reluctance and more like terror. As I listened, I could not help but hear, within that child, the cry that exists in every one of us. Are we not, as the human animal, deeply attached to our mothers? Is that bond not among the oldest instincts we possess? It led me to wonder about the strange reality of modern life. For financial and economic reasons, many mothers have little choice but to leave their young children, sometimes before the age of 3, in daycare. Yet when we look back across our long human history, from our primate ancestors through the emergence of Homo sapiens, our species spent hundreds of thousands of years, and our evolutionary lineage millions, raising children in a very different way. Never, as far as our natural history suggests, would a young child have been routinely separated from its mother and left in the care of unrelated strangers while still in its earliest years of development. One does not need to be an expert in psychology to imagine how overwhelming such an experience could be. Consider a toddler with a forming brain. Everything that child knows about the world comes through its senses. It knows its mother's voice, her scent, her touch. It has been nourished from her breast, comforted in her arms, and has learned that home is the place where safety exists. It slowly becomes familiar with its surroundings, adapting naturally to the ordinary stresses of everyday life. Stress itself is not the enemy. Some stress is necessary for growth. What matters is the dosage. Then, almost overnight, we ask that same child to leave everything familiar behind. The mother carries the child into a completely foreign environment filled with unfamiliar adults and children. Whether the presence of other children is comforting or frightening depends entirely upon the individual child, but the larger experience remains the same. Every face is unfamiliar, every smell is new, every sound is different, and the one person the child trusts most walks away. Taken as a whole, it is difficult not to imagine how frightening that moment must feel. Yet we have come to accept it as simply another part of life. This raises a question worth asking. What is the long-term cost of this experience? What effect does it have upon the developing mind? Does it leave subtle marks upon the adult we eventually become? Or do children adapt with little lasting consequence? These are questions psychologists can continue to study and debate. For the rest of us, perhaps the more important task is simply to pause long enough to ask them. None of this is an argument against socialization. There are obvious benefits to children learning alongside other children. Friendships, cooperation, sharing, conflict resolution, and early education all have value. Those are not what I am questioning. The question is something more fundamental. It is this foreign aspect of the experience that continues to occupy my thoughts. A human toddler is suddenly placed into an unfamiliar environment, separated from its mother and entrusted to complete strangers. No doubt, as animals, and indeed as all living organisms, we are adaptable. But adaptation occurs at varying degrees, over varying lengths of time, and under different levels of stress. Not every adaptation comes without a cost. Such a sudden shift in a young child's world cannot be anything less than emotionally overwhelming. Whether we choose to call it trauma or simply profound distress is perhaps for psychologists to debate, but it is difficult to imagine that such an event leaves no impression upon a developing mind. Some may argue that this separation is inevitable, that every child must eventually leave the mother's side and step beyond the nest. I do not disagree, but that is not the question. The question is whether this separation occurs far too early in the child's development. Is this truly a species-appropriate way for human beings to begin life? I cannot help but think that it is not. It seems to run contrary to the way our nature shaped us over hundreds of thousands of years. Everything carries both benefits and costs. Early daycare may foster social development, independence, and adaptation. Those are genuine advantages. Yet I cannot help but feel that the costs outweigh the benefits. I wonder whether these earliest separations leave subtle impressions that remain with us long after we have forgotten them. Perhaps they become woven into the fabric of modern adulthood itself. There often seems to exist, especially in highly industrialized societies, a quiet, nervous energy beneath the surface of everyday life. Even during calm conversations, there is frequently an undercurrent of anxiety that never quite disappears. Is there any connection? I do not know. But I cannot help noticing the parallel between the abandoned child at the daycare and modern humanity's own separation from Mother Nature. We have exchanged forests for concrete, birdsong for combustion engines, open fields for parking lots, and direct human presence for digital connectivity. It seems almost symbolic of our modern predicament. The crying child becomes more than a child. It becomes a reminder of humanity itself, an animal increasingly separated from the environment that shaped it, adapting to an artificial world while quietly paying a price we may not yet fully understand. Just then, another child begins to cry. The cries rise and fall between the birdsong, the sprinklers upon the grass, the rustling leaves, the trucks unloading at the nearby loading dock, and the distant honking of horns. My brief morning yoga session comes to an end. I stand there for another moment, listening. The sun is still warm upon my face. The breeze still moves through the trees. The birds have never stopped singing, but neither have the children. I quietly turn and walk back inside. As I close the door, the cries remain outside, but somehow I still hear them within myself.